paper workers and United Steelworkers, and we guided, our local helped guide towards policy that talks about working for us. And I want to take those methods that I've learned in the last year and a half, and the challenges that I've learned as president of that local, and move into assisting the town through city council. I believe in a call to service, and this is the way I feel I can best serve this community. And my major policy pushes are a sustainable working budget. We would need to, I've heard a lot of conversation about bolivars and how to best maintain those. Those are public property, and how we need to maintenance those is an important policy that needs to be addressed. It's under park maintenance, and how we best address that, I think, is something we need to do. And lastly, I've talked to a lot of people that work in development, and they are very, very frustrated with the city and how the city goes through its development process and how long it takes to get from ground zero to construction. And I believe that I can help streamline that process, everything from parking to construction. And I'd appreciate the support. And thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. I appreciate the time. My name is John Quant. I'm running for Board 3 City Council. And that's basically the river down to, I believe, Sussex, and from Sentinel over to Russell. I live on East Beckwith Avenue, almost adjacent from the university. And I think that we have a lot of hot button issues right now in the city. And just choosing a couple, the one that always stands out most to me is jobs. We cannot have anything in this city without an industry that is going to support jobs for the long term. We can't have a budget for the city. We can't have education. We can't have a tax base. We can't have any of that. We need to make sure that we bring jobs to this city. I've met 2 people in the last week that are going to be leaving, one who has already left. One was a craftsman, a woodworker, moved to Seattle because there was no work. Lived here in Montana for a long, long time. The other's a graduate from the U, chemistry. She'll be moving back east because there's no jobs. When we lose people like that in the community, it hurts every single one of us. It has a trickle-down effect. We absolutely have to find a way to bring these people back and keep those people here that are still here. Education also goes into this. Without an educated workforce, we cannot give the employers the employees that they need to bring these jobs to town. 1 out of every 4 students are going to drop out of high school in Missoula County Public Schools. That is far too many. I believe the city council can take steps to try to help that. And last, it comes to budget. Budget also affects everything. When the city's spending is out of control, or in the wrong places, then that affects all of us. Our taxes go up because they overspend, they put it in the wrong place. If they want to tax business, then of course that affects the price of things for us, where the businesses are located, if they stay in business. This all means a lot to business when it comes to the budget. There's talk about that businesses should pay the higher amount of property tax because they have people who come in from out of town and put wear and tear on the city that they don't pay for. If we continue that, we're going to run businesses out of town. For instance, the Missoulian, like any business, is struggling. If you raise the property tax, it certainly isn't going to help. That goes for anybody else who's a small business owner. So we need to make sure that we keep these things in check. They all intertwine. And I'd like to end with something that my grandfather used to say. He was a blind man, and he used to say that he did rather well for himself. He used to say, well, how can you live in just this quaint house and have a ton of property and whatnot? And he said, well, I'm blind. People didn't understand that. He couldn't see what everybody else had. He didn't care. What he had met his needs. That's all he needed. That's what we need to come back to as a city. We can't look at other big cities and other towns and say, well, they have it, why can't we? We need to find what our basic needs are and meet that, and start from there. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm John Wilkins. Mr. Haynes asked me what I was going to say, and I said, geez, I don't know. I think this kind of comes out, and sometimes I totally flip my mouth. So, actually, what you see is what you're going to get. What I've done in the last 4 years, you can count on I'll do in the next 4 years. And that's the way I am. I'm not a politician, but I want to give everybody a little bit of a lecture. There's some fine candidates here. When you pick out who you're going to support, it's not only money. They also need help walking their mailers around. They need help in their wards. And that's what's lacking, and that's what the other side has got going for it. So, if you'd rather see us out of the minorities for a change, which I would love to see, it's more than money that's going to make that happen. You got to get out, get people, your young people, the older people, you got to get them out there and work for these people. And I think it's very, very important. I'm fortunate that my opponent is agreeing with everything I say. I'm the only one that's fortunate with that, this go around. But I can't emphasize enough that the other party, and I know this is nonpartisan, they get out, they take the mailings from door to door for their candidates, and they're writing this material, and I don't know if you want that or not, but you need to step up to the plate more than money and help these guys out if we're going to gain at least an equal on the council. And it's been pretty hard. I've been pretty disappointed through the last 4 years on what I've seen coming out of the council. I think my greatest pleasure that I've been able to accomplish is the rental safety program. You know, Missoula is 50-50 ownership rentals. We have a lot of rentals that are just really not far. It even took me a while to get Will on board, but he finally got on board. And I appreciated that too, Will, a lot. But we've got some really bad rentals, and it's a safety problem. I'm a strong supporter of police, fire departments, because they keep our streets safe. I'm really worried about what's happening downtown in our transit population. It seems like people can't balance Missoula's all homeless compared to the guy coming from Butte because they kicked him out, or Whitefish because they kicked him out, or Seattle, Spokane, or wherever, and they're coming here and causing the problem. There is a difference, and people's got to start realizing that. And we got to pass some ordinance to help the police clean up downtown because it's fearful for people to go downtown, and I don't want that, and I don't want to see that anymore. We got one of the most vibrant downtowns in the state, and I'd like to see it kept that way. I was born and raised partially in Great Falls, Montana. I came here in the middle 70s, maybe late 70s. Somewhere like that, and I fell in love with this town. And Ward 4 to me is the most special ward in Missoula, and I know everybody thinks their ward's the best. But we don't want a bunch of changes in Ward 4. We're very happy the way Ward 4 is. So the biggest thing that I've done, and I started this way before I got on city council, is stop the infill type of things that's happening with like alley houses, splitting lots and making them smaller, and this whole zoning rewrite, and you notice I'm saying zoning rewrite, not just a rewrite of our regulations, because I feel like Mr. Haynes and the parties that sued, that it is a zoning rewrite. We haven't properly notified everybody in the zones, and I'm anticipating the judge to say the same thing that I'm thinking and been saying right from the start. So I think though there are tools to bring infill back into nice established neighborhoods. We have a nice established neighborhood, you don't want to mess that up. Single family neighborhoods are hard to come by in Missoula anymore. And you want to try to maintain that. if you do a new subdivision, and whatever it may look like, the people that are buying into that know what they bought into. We bought into what we thought was safe and it was gonna stay that way. And in the last 4 to 8 years, we've seen that starting to erode. And my main principle is to keep that from eroding and to maintain our established neighborhoods. I'm also a Vietnam vet, 67, 68. I spent 10 years in the Army. So veterans issues are a very important thing to me, and sometimes it gets a little emotional to me, but I do that. I don't consider myself a politician. My son now, who's in getting his doctorate in psychology, says I am and always have been, but I don't agree with him, and I haven't agreed with him since he was 2 years old. So hopefully, anyway, that I'll keep doing the same thing that I've been doing in the last 4 years. I think that's what's coming. Thank you.
I think with a few minor changes, I just say ditto. Now, Pete, can you hear me? No. Well, it's too bad. I wanted to start off tonight, the last forum we were in, there that might be the right decision. My opponent said, referring to our lawsuit that raised the red flag, as if there's something wrong there. Well, I'll tell the story. I spent 30 years in the Forest Service, and I knew an old packer. And he was pretty good with mules and horses. And he had one mule. Every morning he got up, he'd take his 2x4 about this long, and he'd go out there and he'd hit that mule between the ears as hard as he could. And somebody said to him, "You're going to hurt the animal doing that." Nope, just getting his attention. That's what we tried to do for city council. We tried to get those people in administration, particularly OPG, to understand we think they're doing something wrong. And it's going to cost the city more in the long run if they don't do it right. So I'd like to point out, and I think most of you have heard some of these, I'd like to mention some real red flags. I go clear back to the aquatics fiasco, where you people and all the other taxpayers in this town voted for an $8 million bond issue to finance the swimming pool. It wasn't enough. They needed more. So the administration, a couple of them as a matter of fact, over time have taken money from other places. They took money away from the police department, money away from the fire department. They have put money into the pockets, into the program that were never authorized by the people. So now that swimming pool has cost us close to $16 million, almost double what people voted on. Think about that extra $8 million, what we could have done with that on someplace like Hillview. Speaking of which, that's the eastern boundary of my ward. And when we showed some of the paperwork to the deputy county attorney, Mr. Hendrickson was there, myself, and another person. He looked at what the city had done, and he says, "This is illegal." So we said, "Are you going to do anything about it?" "Well, no," John, referring to the county, he really doesn't like to get mixed up in city affairs. So that kind of washed up the bridge. The next one I thought was pretty good, what we call BSR, Brooks South Russell, that big intersection that everybody loves to hate down there. When they did, I'm not so critical of design as I am of how it was built. The contractors were kind of turned loose to do what they wanted. They had people out there with notepads supposedly counting the gravel loads and the asphalt and all this. And you never do that with any contract. You have inspectors from whatever entity, whatever government entity is sponsoring that, there to measure loads and keep track of what goes on. So that kind of blew up in the city's face. And since it had federal money involved in it, the Federal Highway Administration has a policy they call non-participation, or non-par for short. And if the federal money isn't spent properly, they take it away from the state. And the state's the one that gives it to the city. sometimes if they don't take it away that year, the next year they'll shortchange the state that much. But anyway, in either case, the federales don't lose money with a smile on their face. In this case, they said this was a mess. As a matter of fact, John Hendrickson and I went over and sat through a hearing with Mr. Bender, one of our more famous engineers in Missoula.
Oh, yeah.
And the assistant director for the State Highway Department stood up like I am now and said, like, I've never seen a mess like this before. When you have somebody telling you that kind of thing, things are serious. For a while, it looked like the city was going to get about $4 or $5 million taken away from it. You can imagine what that did to our budget. The lady that was head of the Federal Highway Administration in the state of Montana, she's a professional engineer and a very sharp person. She said we've done everything we can do to work with you folks. And they finally got it down to where they made the city pay $150,000 and the contractor pay similar. The key, though, was a couple things. One, the state required the city to warrant all their work for 5 years. And Mr. Bender said, well, normally they only put a requirement for 2 years. And the state came back and said, yes, but we don't know what you put on the ground. We don't know what kind of materials you use. That ought to tell you something. When we got back to Missoula, I tried to tell the mayor he had a problem in his staff. And so one afternoon, Mr. Bender came in and wanted to talk to me. So we sat down and had a talk. Pretty soon we were both walking around the room like a couple of bulldogs, checking each other out. And I was trying to get him to understand how responsibility works. And that's a real interesting chore when you deal with that gentleman. And I kept kind of working upstream. Well, if you have an inspector that isn't doing his job, then it becomes the engineer's problem. If the engineer doesn't do something about it, then it becomes the engineering firm's problem. If the engineering firm doesn't do something with it, then it becomes the city's problem, and so on. Eventually, I worked it up to, Bender, it looks like it's your problem. You know what he told me? He said, the Federal Highway Administration does not understand how we do business in Missoula. That doesn't tell you anything. I don't know what does. The next one I think you all maybe have heard a little rumor about that I think is a red flag. Have you heard about the fire hydrants? I know some of you have. What the deal was is if you were paying taxes on water usage, you were paying something for fire hydrant maintenance. Well, Mountain Water went to the Public Service Commission and said, we would like to bill the ratepayers directly, as it was. We were paying into the city, and the city was in turn paying Mountain Water. And after a couple of months or so, finally the Federal or the Public Service Commission said to Mountain Water, okay, you can bill the ratepayers directly. So you may have noticed that you're now getting a bill from that. But go look at your taxes, because your taxes haven't gone down. The city is still collecting the same amount of money they were before. And what we heard there was, it's just a reallocation of dollars. In other words, you're paying twice instead of once now for the water and the fire hydrant maintenance. That's the way those people downtown think. There's a lot of those kinds of things. Another one that I don't think really made much press, but over here on the Russell and 13th construction over there and the bridge and all that, there's a pretty good sized chunk of federal money came in to pay for that. And one day, the Transportation Planning Coordinating Committee, TPCC, which is made up of federal people, state people, county people, city people, and who works, sit around and decide how this money is going to be spent. Our mayor is one of the delegates to that committee, as is Stacy Rye. And I don't think Stacy Rye understands the road unless she's in on a bicycle. But anyway, they said the mayor made this move to take half the money, about $13 million, and spend it on trails and that type of thing. And the committee passed it. You know, like we need $13 million worth of trails when we're trying to build a road over here. But the state came back and said, if you do that, you aren't going to get any of this other money that we normally give you, which goes to pay for mountain line and some of those kinds of things. There will be no more money coming to the city. Because you could hear the gears grind as they went into reverse to get out of that mess.
Dick, can you wrap this up? There'll be time later on.
No, I can't wrap it up. I I got pizza undivided attention, so just leave me alone. Anyway, that's the kind of city government you have. That's why when John says we need some more people on that city council and not the lose the ones we already have. If we could make that happen, the city of Missoula, the government, would take a tsunami with you town. Thank you.
I'll be somewhat brief. When I lived in Ward 5, Dick Haynes was the person that I voted for every time. And if I lived there, I would vote for him again. My name is Kathy Grayhouse. I am running for City Council on Ward 6, and that is the best neighborhood for now. It is between Russell and Reserve from about the river up towards the mall. So it's pretty much the heart of the city. Right now, we have a lot of issues going on. I'm extremely concerned about the SID for sidewalks, the truth in lending that the city actually does. They may tell someone that because of your income, we're only going to charge you $6,000 and then turn around and just put the rest so when they sell their house, they can pay it off. It's really no bargain. Most people don't understand exactly the cost of these SIDs. I'm worried about the complete streets resolution that's coming because we have ancient infrastructure. And I hope it's ancient from about 1916. Most of our sidewalks are in really tough shape. But we have a lot of moderate to low income people. We have a lot of elderly people on fixed incomes. And with the most recent tax increases, and I know we're going to have another one, I would hate to see them lose their home over a sidewalk. I think that the city needs to slow down and be more concerned about the senior citizens, the people who are moderate to low income. I'm not asking for subsidies, I'm just saying slow down a little bit. Let's get the economy back on track. Let's actually bring jobs to Missoula, good paying jobs, jobs that blue collar workers can go to. We've lost jobs in the forest industry, we've lost a lot of construction jobs. We may never reach that point again. So we have to let's look at something to bring in to give them jobs that they can buy their house without being subsidized. They can raise their family. And I think that's also our answer for affordable housing. Bring some good jobs in. That's pretty much all I have to say for now. I do look forward, and I hope that we get asked a lot of questions because I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I might also mention that there are 3 councilors that had other things and could not come. Councilor Strohmeyer, Jaffe, and Marler could not be here. Mr. Strohmeyer and Ms. Marler have written sort of an introductory letter. I would read them if time permits afterwards. I think it's more important that we spend the time questioning those that are here rather than reading some of these things. But they are here. They are open if we have time later on, or you can pass them around the table. Now, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Please try to make your questions succinct. Harry, I'll get to you. Try to make them succinct and direct. We want to hear from them. Although your questions are important, we'd rather hear from them on items. I will moderate those. I will try and spread the questions around. I don't want 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 persons to take up all the time. I'm sure you all have concerns. Harry, you're first.
I think it was Mr. O'Hara made comments about the infill, purpose for which is putting people in close proximity of the services that they want and need. And I was born and raised in Missoula in the rattlesnake. Grew up in the 50s and 60s, when virtually every home in Missoula had a big yard. Nowadays, so many of them don't have a big yard. They have another house in their backyard. I don't buy the philosophy that it's about putting people in proximity of services. I believe it's about revenue. I believe it's revenue driven. The yard does not bring revenue to the city's coffers. A duplex back there, or in some cases a fourplex alongside, brings revenue to the city coffers. What you build today and what's been built over the last 15, 20, 25 years, it's going to be here 25 years from now. And it's perfectly legitimate to say that the population demographics may change. And we may have neighborhoods where we've got 100 or 125 children per block. That's a quality of life that I wouldn't want to grow up in. Even though I grew up in the Rattlesnake, I live out in the 9 Mile now, where I have a little bit of room to breathe. Now, some real progress has been made on air quality, because back in the 50s, we had the teepees from, what, 3 or 4 different wood products operations, burning smoke. For the first 10 years that Smurfit Stone, then called Horner Waldorf, I believe, spewed its stuff, it stunk up the whole city. I mean, you could smell it in the Rattlesnake, and that was 10, 12 miles away. But that cleanup is being compromised by the traffic. And this infill, we don't have the road system to deal with it. The traffic in this town is atrocious, and it's not going to get better because the emphasis on more infill. And there's not enough emphasis on road building and road maintenance. I drove into the Rattlesnake today to go visit my mother, and I seen the sidewalks that they were putting in up there. Most of the people in the Rattlesnake are still paying SIDs for the sewer that went in up there. In these neighborhoods and along these roads that never had sidewalks, I think it's a waste of money. I think it's being done simply to line the pockets of the contractors, the local contractors. It's not a secret that the developers and the builders basically carried the most clout in this city for the last 20, 25 years. So I think it's a waste of time. Mike, would you please don't interrupt? I have a question though.
I'd like to hear some questions.
We'll have a question. I have to set the stage just like they did. Do you find any validity, Mr. O'Hara, in what I have just said?
Okay, thanks for the question. It sounds like you're in favor of road building and road maintenance versus infill. Is that generally what you're saying? And also not building sidewalks in the wrong places. Is that, okay. I've gone on record already saying about building new sidewalks. I kind of consider it retrofitting neighborhoods that weren't built with the sidewalks to begin with. And if I was starting a neighborhood from scratch, I would strongly look at building the complete street type of a model where you have sidewalks, a planting strip for the urban trees, but connecting the sidewalks somewhere. Because one of the problems with retrofitting neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks and installing a sidewalk is the neighborhood might not have anywhere to walk to. I mean, parts of the Rattlesnake don't have stores and parks you can just walk right to on a sidewalk, so it may not always make sense to put new sidewalks in. And I've said that before, that I'd look carefully at exactly where you're proposing to put these and make sure you have the neighborhood support before you embark on that type of project. Infill is, there's a lot of different opinions about infill. And, you know, it involves things like property rights and neighborhood quality, and again, locating people and centralizing them nearer the services and the businesses and things like that. So I think it's also, and the topic has to be looked at as far as exactly where you're talking about filling in spaces. If I had a big enough lot and it was legal for me to add a small structure and rent it, and I was just on the brink of not being able to afford my property, I'd want to be able to consider that, if possible, if the zoning allowed it in my neighborhood, and my neighbors weren't opposed to it. And there are, in fact, people in Missoula that have enough room on their lot to have extra structure and possibly get some income off the small structure to allow them to stay in that property longer when they're on the brink of not being able to afford it. So it is a struggle for an urban center to decide how exactly are we going to grow and expand. But the question that we don't have an answer is, will Missoula grow? Missoula will grow. So we have to look at, should it grow out, should it grow up, or should it be a combination of both? And roads, building new roads and maintaining them, it's an expensive proposition. So I like having a well-maintained street in my neighborhood. And we live in a neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks on our side of the street. It doesn't have the urban tree, on our, the city-owned tree on our side of the street. And I kind of miss the sidewalk. And we have families on our block that could use the sidewalk because they walk across the street or they walk down the middle of the street or the side of the street to get to the store at the end of the block. So we could actually benefit from having a sidewalk. And I would like a tree out near the curb as well. So depending on how much it costs, I consider for our property to kick in some money for something like a maintenance district or an SID. As long as it wasn't extravagant amounts of money, I would at least consider it, and my wife would too. So I think it varies by family, it varies by level of income, it varies by what you like about a city. Is it concentrated, where lots of people are in one place, and you can take buses and not own a car, versus spread out, where people have more property and more of that little piece of Montana. So things like community or neighborhood councils that can entertain these discussions and decide what people want in their own neighborhood, and then working closely with city council members and pushing your council members to implement the policies you want for your part of town is extremely important. So I tend to like infill in the appropriate place, but I also understand that some people don't want to do it. And again, it varies family to family on what you want in your yard and in your neighborhood. And I think people should become active and talk about it with their neighbors, be active in their neighborhood council, and try to push their city council members to implement those policies they think are appropriate for their area. And I hope I covered what you were talking about. Thanks.
Do any of the rest of you want to respond? Sure, go ahead.
Ryan Morton, Ward 1. I think the question actually was directed more to me, and I did not say infill. I said that we need to get services where housing is, and there's a variety of different ways to do that. As a point of comparison, if you take the Rattlesnake versus downtown, obviously there are more services downtown that are already there, and we need to make sure that infrastructure is properly accounting for how many people live there, how many people can live there, and whatnot. Versus the Rattlesnake, where you have two ways to get out of the Rattlesnake. It's either Van Buren or Reno, and there's no other way to get around it. And so when you're going through your planning processes, you have to decide, is this an appropriate place to put a whole bunch of homes, and is it appropriate to send roads up the mountain? And there's a lot of people that are saying no. And I think that's a fair answer in the context of the Rattlesnake. And so when we're talking about bringing services to something like the Rattlesnake, you're not bringing higher density to the Rattlesnake. What you might bring is something more like a neighborhood market to the Rattlesnake, or a small center where they can shop where they can buy something so that they don't have to go all the way into Albertsons to buy it. That's a sort of difference between downtown, where you're going to have the hospital, you're going to have office buildings, you're going to have banks, you're going to have all these different services. It's a completely different context based on the area. And I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that you need to bring housing to services in ways that fit the context of the particular neighborhood. And I think the comparison between downtown and the Rattlesnake is a good comparison. Another good comparison is to look at the north side, where there is a great deal of high-density housing, but there's almost no services, and they have to come all the way into Broadway to get any services, or they have to go all the way out to North Reserve. And I don't think that's fair to them. I think in that particular instance, some more neighborhood markets being available could reduce the amount of time they spend traveling and reduce the amount of traffic going out Broadway and out Reserve. So I think there's a variety of different perspectives. It's not just infill. And I would agree to some extent that infill, it should be based on the context of the neighborhood, not simply a general policy that we're going to fill every neighborhood with infill. I think in places like downtown, higher density is appropriate. In the upper Rattlesnake, it is not. And I think we can make those sort of decisions as council people. We can use zoning to secure that those sort of decisions have some teeth, and then we can follow through by saying we're not going to rezone and allow higher density. In terms of infrastructure, I think one of my biggest points that I've tried to get across to you was improving the infrastructure, particularly the sewer out into the Rattlesnake. That it's completely unfair that people pay into the sewer and don't get sewer service. I think that's something that we have to address. I think in other neighborhoods, it's more of an issue of roads. In maybe Franklin to the Fort, it's an issue of parks. And it's all sort of based on the particular neighborhood. And I agree with you that infrastructure has to be dealt with. But I also think it has to be improved based on the context of the neighborhood. And I hope that by looking at the context of the neighborhood, you have a better sense of where I'm coming from. I think higher density to go downtown. Maybe a neighborhood market or two needs to go into the Rattlesnake. We need to get people connected to sewer who are paying on sewer in the Rattlesnake. We need a better road system that gets people in and out of downtown. Whether you think that's a 3-lane or a 4-lane type of approach, which is also a controversial issue at this point. So those are the sort of questions that have to be based on the context of the neighborhood. And that's the approach I would take. And I would not just simply say infill everywhere, because that is not what I stand for. And that's not what I've ever said. And that's not what I would ever do.
Anyone else want to respond?
Well, real quick, because I've been involved in the infill issue, actually what got me on city council in the last, over 4 years ago. Infill needs all different to everybody. It depends on where you live. In my neighborhood, 5,400 square feet, that's what we're zoned for. All of a sudden, they started splitting lots and building 2 houses on 5,400 square feet. That's infill to me. Orchard Homes, they live on an acre or 2 acres, and now they're asking, there's developers out there building houses on 5,400 square feet, which to me is a good house, but to them it's not, because of what they're used to. The important thing, when you talk about infill, what is the zoning there now? And you ask the neighbors, not just the neighborhood council. I'm a strong supporter of neighborhood council. I even help get them founded and stuff. But unfortunately, there's 15 or 20 people in the neighborhood council that show up. If it's a hot button issue, there might be a bunch more. But you got to get out, knock on the doors, and see what the people want. Okay? One thing, at least I didn't hear these 2 guys say, is affordability, because they definitely weren't affordable. I can point to 300 block of South Avenue, those infill projects that went up there, where the window wells in the basement had to be staggered because they were so close to each other, they couldn't put them in, okay? They went for $200,000 and some thousand. So that wasn't affordability. One other point I want to get to you right now on the infill issue, I just looked at subdivision review, or it's when they go, somebody's trying to change a lot, a minor subdivision. So this lot, this one I looked at was 3 lots. It was it was built that way just a few years ago under the planned neighborhood cluster. That guy had decided there's no market for that anymore. And he took them 3 lots and put them back to 2 lots. So there wasn't a market for it anymore. And you talk about the rattlesnake. When I first moved to Missoula, I lived on Jackson Street. There was a beautiful lot there that I wanted that this kind of hippie guy had. He used to have this garden in there, but it was always full of weeds. There's 2 houses sitting on that lot. You get to the lower end of Rattlesnake, and there's houses right tight together. The city was talking about a noise ordinance. So my suggestion was, well, in this noise ordinance, you're gonna have to include snoring. Everybody looked at me, what the heck are you talking about? Well, if you're living so doggone close together and the guy next door is snoring, that's a noise ordinance. So hopefully we're moving away from that. But if you go out to Carl Tyler, make a left and go up back to Carl Tyler, and you see that subdivision that's out there, narrow streets, you can't even pass 2 cars, there's parking on each side. You got these quaint little houses with these front porch with only a sidewalk and a little stretch of lawn about as wide as this table separating the 2. And so when you're sitting on your porch, you can talk to the neighbor right across the sidewalk from you. Little kids running all over, no place to play. Cats and dogs running all over, no fence, you can't have a fence out there. That is our future slum of Missoula right there. And that's the type of infill that, no. I might be for infill downtown where the amenities are, where the condos, they want to build condos and stuff. First, they need to clean up downtown. But that is where, if I wanted to get rid of my big house on my 5,400 square feet someday and move into a condo, it'd be nice to be able to walk to the theater, it'd be nice to be able to walk to all the cafes. That would be a good thing, I think. So there probably is room for some infill, but our established neighborhoods, that's what gave the character to Missoula, and by God, we better keep that character.
Anyone else? Chuck? Here, here.
Again, John Quan for Ward 3. I just want to address a couple things when it comes to zoning and infill. I hear oftentimes about the ADU being a way for somebody to afford to make their payment on their home or their property. If you're not able to make the payment on your home or your property now, you sure as heck can't get a loan to build an ADU. I can tell you that. You certainly can't use it towards the ability to make a payment on a house when you're applying for that loan application. If it's not already there, you can't do it even if it is there. So that really just doesn't set well with me when it comes to using that argument that the ADU will help somebody make their mortgage. Your property taxes will also go up accordingly. So you're going to have to charge accordingly for that. It really doesn't make a lot of sense for that argument. And again, much like John said, I bought an area because of what it was, not because what it is going to be. If I wanted that, I'd go buy out by the airport. We really need to keep the integrity of our current neighborhoods. We absolutely have to. You know, when it comes to roads being expensive to build for the sprawl, the reality is that the infill is going to put just as much cost on our infrastructure as it is going to be to build a road. And one of my major concerns that I have is that we currently cannot afford to pay the police officers per capita that we have. We had to get a grant to bring on the 3 that we had to let go. Now, if you're going to have infill, and on the current tax base, you cannot afford to pay the police officers that you have per capita, and you're going to have infill, and you're going to end up having a crime problem. And we like our streets where we can have our safe streets to school programs, but you're not going to have that unless you raise the tax base. So along with infill, if you want to keep your police and fire up to code when it comes to per capita, then you have to raise your tax base. We can't even afford what we have now. So you're going to face infill, you're going to face raised taxes, you're going to face unhappy neighbors because you pile on top of one another. There's only one way to stop sprawl or density. Quit having babies. That's it. That's the only way. Thank you.
Anyone else? Want to take on? Okay, let's have another question. John, or Jim, you have one.
We won't have a lot of babies. I'm on the school board. And we can use the A and B. I was sitting here listening to Ryan Morton, and you know, I was on the city council with your father, and he sounded a lot like you. We had the same arguments back then as we are now. Things never change, believe it or not. My question is this. Missoula County Public Schools owns a 10-acre parcel up the rail estate. And in that, we weren't basically using it. It was purchased in the days when we thought there was a big subdivision going in up in Sunlight and all of Montana Power, but that all kind of went away. And so it became a property that we basically wanted to sell. And the University of Montana project called the PEAS program, I think it is, came to us and said they wanted to plant a garden there, and we said, well, okay. And we leased them to the city, who then took care of that because that's the best way to do it. Okay, our problem is now we're in a very untenable situation. We can't sell our property. Because located on there is this big university project, and everybody loves it. And then you go up there and see chickens and pull corn and stuff. And so here we are. And my question to you is, you know, the city has a way of looking at school property as your property, and who cares? You put a road right through our property. We paid for 10 years. Saving up right across from Sentinel High School, absolutely ruining it for school use. Then we have the road in the middle. We have to sell that. And also the Peas Farm is up there, and we have 10 acres, and we'd like to sell that. Now, my question to you, or anybody who can answer, is what is the school district going to do? We're in a terrible public relations issue because the Peace Farm is very likable, and they're doing a good thing, and nobody's saying that what they're doing is bad. But you see the issue. What can we do? We basically now have leased it. Property is worth probably $4 or $5 million. 10 acres on the Rattlesnake Creek with frontage. And we could use that to remodel other schools and so forth. And so I would like a commitment when you are sitting there going through your elected and so forth, to think of the schools and the Peace Farm and so forth. I really, what is my question? My question is, I wanted to raise the issue to you so you know that is a problem. The schools are looking for money constantly, and now we have a big piece of property now, basically turned. And we've done another little nice thing, and that is we bought it with zoning, one zoning, and then we changed the zoning on us, and here we are as a public open area. If you look at the school, thinking that we're never going to sell property. So you go in, and all the neighbors, they always want to look at property. Everybody else's property is park, as long as they don't know it's your property is park. I got my viewscape, and so we have that issue. So when you're going through these situations, think of the schools, and that their land should be able to be cashed eventually. Schools can't save money in any other way except owning property that we sell in the future. And what you've done, the city, you personally, but the city, is basically taken a huge chunk of our future money and children's money and not used it very wisely. The Lowell School is sitting on the big park there. That's all city run, and we lease it to the city for $1. I know everybody cry and howl if we ever close Lowell School, but what if we did? What could we do? Is the city really going to buy the park that they've had for 50 years? No. So there's a situation we need to have some sort of communications more with the city council in your planning to help preserve the property values for the schools.
Anybody want to, let's start with Ken.
Okay, first, I'm going to stand up because I don't talk very loud. I hope you can hear me. I did help contribute to the school system. I'm the mother of 8. Seriously. I do have one left at home. He's going into 7th grade at CS Porter. One thing that I think that the city needs to help the schools, especially if you do need to get the income out of that property, whether it's exchanging for a property that might be, a more benefit for someone else. I know that in Franklin to the Fort, we're even trying we're looking at all options for parkland because this is one of the few areas that doesn't have much for parks. We have Franklin Park, and for as many people as we have in the smart growth that's coming our way, and I'm saying smart growth because that's where our community is headed. We're looking at exchanging maybe with the Forest Service. We've met with the NRC, looking, for any kind of a trade that we can do with land. And I don't see any reason why that we couldn't work with the school system and help get you out from underneath that. And I agree, the schools need money desperately. And I would look forward to working on that one myself. Thank you.
I think there's some things here that are not, I don't understand. The school still owns the property,
Yes.
and they've leased it to the city
Right, for $1 a year.
for what kind of time limit?
Well, they're supposedly for, I think, about 9 or 10 more months. But you think the schools can cancel that lease?
Yes, I think you can. Why couldn't you?
Well, we've given everybody notice.
Go sit on the school board.
Yeah.
To reach your point, if you want the money, that has to be a paramount concern, I would think. you could say to the leasing, and I don't know that the city can tell you any different. And we put it on signs and stuff like that, so I have a real question whether we can tell you what you have to do with your land.
What I was really, I understand that, but the practicality of it is that we would really prefer to trade that property for something
Okay, but
else.
if you trade it, you still have to deal with the issue of the city having a lease on it.
Well, who cares? If the city gives us another piece of property, you can have the chicken farm.
You're looking for the city. So what you're saying is you want the city to provide another piece of property.
That would be very nice, yeah. You ruined our other big property across from Elder High
We were
School.
looking for property to build a police station. Now you want us to find something to trade with.
Well, we got some
There's
talk
a problem there that I'm not sure that, until I got to bite the bullet or something. But
Let's go to John Anderson, you haven't heard from him, you have something.
City and the county passed an open space bond. Open space bond is one of the criteria in there is to preserve farmland or agricultural, which obviously this is. That's where I would go. Obviously, it would have to be having a joint city-county purchase and/or leverage. There are other.
We need an advocate in the city to do that.
Well,
I asked the mayor specifically for that, and I didn't get an answer. But if we had an advocate, we might be able to do that.
if the school district wants their day, what I call the day in court, I offer any citizen in Missoula, whether I agree with their issue or not, I'll put a referral in front of the proper committee and have a hearing on it. I have no problem doing that. I've done it before for individuals, whether I agree with it or not. Everybody's entitled to what I call their day in court. But I firmly believe that as a taxpayer, I mean, the school district's up against the wall. You're $1 million short this year. I was on the news today. Cut the program that's set alive for unwed mothers, teams of mothers. You're in the same position, we are in now, we're going to be in next year. You have to make tough decisions. I don't envy you that. But the open space money is there for that reason. And I think that's where we should go. As far as, I like to see it stay the way it is. If you out from underneath it, you mean the school district. But, and I don't know if we have any property that the city owns for a swap, to be honest. Of that magnitude of, well, other than the triangle. But, yeah, that's where I would go. And I think that needs to be a discussion within the city or within the community, not just the city, but the county. Because, the transcend goes back and forth. And I'd be more than happy to make that referral and have that discussion. I think it's about a good piece of land. I think the organization, CFAC, which is Swimming Light or any other agricultural community that want to reserve farmland should be going after grants for that piece of land alongside with let's say open space money and maybe some of the other organizations within the state or county. I'd be more than happy to do that with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in order, I saw the hands go up. John, did you have something you want to talk
Yeah.
about? No, John Quan.
Oh, sorry.
Then we'll go to Ryan and then.
Well, Mr. Sadler, you're probably not going to enjoy what I'm going to say. I came in front of the school board because of a sign at Sentinel High School. I got no respect from the school board. It was the hardest thing that I had to do because I've supported the schools on every levy, not only every levy, but I've also the unwed mother program. I've done a lot of donations towards that program. I'm upset about what's happening there. I'm more upset that the city put that street through there that you're talking about, and they haven't maintained it. The boulevards are full of knapweeds, and it just looks horrible. And I yelled at the city about it. They say you're responsible for it. The school board is. So I yelled at your supervisor about it, and I have gotten nowhere. One thing I found out when I bought that sign was you do not have to follow any of the zoning regulations in Missoula. Signs, housing, any of the zoning regulations, because you're a public, it's public land. So I guess if you want to get rid of that land up there, maybe you ought to start building infill houses and sell them off one at a time. And that would be a good way to raise money for the schools. And that probably, I want to object if it was for money for the schools. So I'm a little angry about it. You guys got yourself into the lead. Actually, we just, a Chickasaw subdivision out in Orchard Homes, 3 acres that went to agricultural land that we took was in the city that I was dead against because I believe agricultural land in the city that you have no control could end up with pigs or whatever, and all of a sudden you got houses around it. There might be an opportunity there for the Pete's farm to go there. So, you know, I think you guys can break that lease whenever you want. And sure, you're gonna get a little stink, but I get a little stink every time I try to do something. But I'm telling you, you're not even covered under any of our zoning regulations. And I found that out when I was trying to
We are
decide
who
the
sell.
sign, so.
We are who sell.
The owner, if you sell it, then the owner that buys it at that time will have to bring it into the city, and yes. But if I remember right, we did rezone that up there, and I think we took it off public land, and I could be wrong, but we zoned it so houses could be built. So, I could be wrong in that, but that seems the way I remember that. But I'm more than willing to support anything the school board wants if it's in with reason. And I'm like Mr. Henderson, I back his referral for that. But I also expect likewise when I have a problem with the school board. And obviously I did not get that. So the future of my neighborhood is going to have this big sign that doesn't meet any of our goals with this big reader board that all the neighbors in a residential area is going to have to look at. And that was really unfortunate.
John Quant next.
I just want to bring up real quick, you mentioned about agriculture, John. I think one of the questions that people are asking is what to define ag land. What exactly is ag land? Well, I was passed an email that contained the referral, submission of a referral from a city council member to PAC, to Bob Jaffe, to define ag land. That was early June, I believe, beginning of June. Still hasn't come to, still hasn't happened, hasn't even been brought up. This is such a hot button issue when it comes to zoning, possibly school situation, all kinds of things. And I think when we have somebody who's heading PAC doesn't bring that up, pretty big issue, we need to look at that. So keep that in mind, and you can push that on, try to get that brought up. That might help.
Ryan, I think you were next, and then Mark.
I'm actually pretty familiar with the Peace Project and CFAC, and I definitely do believe that agriculture has a place in Missoula. Utilizing a $1 lease or utilizing free labor from the university is not a sustainable form of agriculture. It's not a sustainable form of anything. So I think at some level we're going to have to come to terms with how do we subsidize agriculture? Should we subsidize agriculture? And is it appropriate to make the school system suffer? Is it appropriate to make property owners suffer? Those are questions we haven't answered yet. In fact, when the Chickasaw subdivision was mentioned, 3 acres were taken from a property out of 10 acres just for agriculture, for no really good reason and based on no policy. So, I feel for you in that regard, that, why is my land, or why is our land being used in a way that is unfair to me? I think that happens more often than not. But when it comes down to it, I'm a big proponent of property rights, and if you want to make the city a deal, what land would you like? What land would you like to trade? Where would you like to go? Do you need to trade 10 acres for 10 acres, or do we do 10 acres of this land for 5 acres of more expensive land? What would it take? And I would support that sort of outlook. I think it does happen. If you wanted to sell the land, I'm more than happy to push people pushing agriculture to buy it. I think that's an appropriate.
We want cash.
Pardon? Yeah, that's fair. I think that's, you're facing the same issue the folks in Chickasaw are facing. Why are you taking my land for use? I don't want to use it for, why can't I use it the way I want to? And if you want to use it this way, why don't you pay me for it? And I think those questions haven't been answered. And I've been working with MDIA, MOR, the Chamber, and a few other folks to fund a study to answer those sort of questions so that we know whether or not we need to protect 10 acres in the Rattlesnake, or whether we need to be thinking bigger about 240 acres in Lake County and how that is the same food source. So I think that question of agriculture is unique unto itself, but I don't have an answer for you. Although I can say that many of those folks have burned the bridges with me, and I'm looking more for a private sector solution rather than a CFAC solution on that particular one. In regards to your property rights, I'm a firm believer in property rights, and like I said, I would support a trade, and if you wanted to sell, that's something I would be willing to approach, because that is certainly a big issue for me as well. I think that's just a question.
Again, Michael Heron for Ward 5, and we live right across the street from medical school. With a good throw of a baseball, I could hit some school property that is partially used as a garden. It's Garden City Park. It's a beautiful community garden on the end of the property, and but there's a giant lot there that's owned by the school. It's used by the neighborhood for open space, basically, and so people walk and exercise and run the dog. And they've actually expanded the garden a little bit this year. And the question is really, it's before it's an agriculture question, the question is how can the schools realize the development potential of school-owned property, especially in an area that's growing and the developable property is getting more and more valuable. So you see other property owners at times, maybe not lately, the see is a messy process. So we're trying to struggle with local agriculture, and the desire for local agriculture in the Peace Farm is a wonderful thing because they not only grow food locally, but they teach kids the value of being able to work in the soil and growing crops and farm animals. It's a wonderful idea and a wonderful thing that they're doing. But there is a property rights issue again where, and I think John mentioned the solution is finding ways to pay that development or to compensate for the development value that's resting on that property, just like everywhere else in Missoula that can be developed. So I would definitely work towards the city council. I don't know what I could get for a solution, but I would definitely work with all sides of the issue and represent this exact very issue that you're talking about as a city council member if I'm elected. And I tend to be a moderate. I'm a moderate person. I would consider myself. I would foresee myself being a moderate presence on the city council, and I also work with the various entities that you would have to interact with, including the mayor's office, the city council itself, the school board, and nonprofits and private sources of funding to see if you could get conservation easements put on those lands that Garden City Harvest and the Peace Farm money used for local gardens. The first thing, though, I think would be to try to raise the awareness of Missoula citizens and let them know this is a school-owned parcel. I don't think everybody in our neighborhood knows that it is. Let them know it's a school-owned parcel. There's development opportunities for the schools. They're strapped for cash. They're looking for ways to pay for schools and education. It's very important that we struggle with these different values and opportunities we have on the publicly owned lands right within our own city limits. And I volunteer to be that person on the city council if I'm elected. Thank you.
Silly me, I had 6 questions thinking that we might run out of questions. So far, we've had 2 questions. And at the current rate, we probably only got time for 1 more. Charlie, do you have one?
Yes, I do. I went through a long day yesterday, and the nut of it is that we're facing about a 17% increase in property taxes next year. if the levy stays the same. So I'd like each of you to address what your intent is to do with that little 17% windfall. Whether you plan on giving it back to us poor folks who are unemployed right now, or if you're going to spend it.
Let me First of all, I don't know where you get the 17%, but I know we haven't gotten the reappraisals from the state yet. So, but reading the paper is one thing, but what's actually going to come in the mail in the next week or so could be a surprise. And I can only address the city portion. Okay, we passed the budget last night. Three other members of the council voted against it. It was touted as being no increase in property taxes. That's not entirely true. It's what I thought as being a revenue neutral budget, meaning the city is raising property taxes to city residents a full 1.5 rate of inflation, which is allowed, plus what was left on the table over the last couple of years. You're not, city residents will not, as far as the city budget goes, will not see an increase in your taxes because the mill levies are remain the same. I believe it's 222,165. So it's the same as last year, but the $434,000 is offset by savings that we have on interest payments on loans that are, it's like a house payment basically. You know, everybody knows your interest goes down, starts lying goes down. So what the mayor and the administration is touting is no increase in property taxes is not entirely true. We will not see an increase in city taxes. We can't account for the county, and I can't account for the state.
When you say that, are you talking about a total dollar amount, or are you talking about levy rate?
I'm talking about the levy rate.
So the values go up, taxes.
If the state values go up, and but I'm talking about, and that's what I'm saying, that's why I can't address it, because we haven't gotten the numbers from the state yet. They're supposed to be released yesterday, or today. So, last year they said the same thing, and it was 2 weeks after the fact. So I can't account for that yet. I can't answer dollars and cents. I can answer that right now the city's mill levy is going to remain the same, but there is an increase in property tax per se. I'm an advocate of returning it back to the citizens rather than reallocating. There are other savings within the city budget, which I will get into to the tune of about $750,000 also. But given that and the makeup of the council, the reallocation is the only other alternative, and my druthers would be to put it into a sinking fund to save it. For the police station, we'll buy the fire trucks next year, which we're going to need, so we don't have to go before the citizens for a GO bond, and so on. Hope I answered your question.
Right. Another issue you have to consider is the appraisal process itself. That one of the fights that the Missoula Building Industry Association, National Association, is trying to do is try to redo the way things are appraised, because there are two issues. One is markets where foreclosures are dropping appraisal rates, and then there's places like Missoula where we're raising property taxes through impact fees and through increasing the amount of sidewalks and infrastructure required at subdivision, that the appraisal of a home that looks about the same as one that was built 10 years ago ends up costing more and is appraised for more. And if it's right next to that older house, both homes get appraised at a higher rate. So there's that issue that it has to be dealt with at a higher level than just whether or not we can raise or lower your taxes. Generally speaking, though, I would be in favor of refunding any windfall, and I will not favor any increase in maintenance districts or any other kind of tax district without a subsequent reduction of general property taxes. I'm on record of saying that, and that's definitely something I would stand for. And the last thing I would say is that unfortunately, there are some things we can't change. We have general obligation bonds that we cannot get out of one way or the other. And then, of course, as John mentioned, our county taxes as well. We cannot control at the city level. But generally speaking, I hope you got my point. But I think there's an appraisal issue. I want to see a refund if it's possible. I do not want to see an increase without a subsequent decrease elsewhere. And there are some things that are just out of our control, and I wish they were.
Anybody else want to respond? We have time for another question.
I think Roy wanted to answer the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
that I've been pretty quiet here, taking it all in here. And I find Roy Houseman running for city council Ward 2. You know, we have a lot, all of these issues are starting to intertwine with each other. And they're coming around very basic things, where you want your taxes dollars to go. And, you know, as has been brought up and brought up before, is that we don't know where the property values or reappraisal from the state's going to be, so we have to see where that's going to come. Any increase, any excess funding that is appropriated, I agree with that cornerstone that we need to utilize that money in a long-term financing standard. And in relation to, this keeps stemming back to me about how we talked about how we have a desire to have a rural community, but we're in a growing urban center. And these, here's the thing, is if you're able to split your lot and afford to be able to do that and sell that lot, gain income, you increase the tax base, you provide more services within a controlled service area. Yet at the same time, we want this open space, and how much do we want to pay for it? That's what we have to ask. That's what the public school is asking right now. The public school goes, we really like this opportunity, and we've given this really great opportunity that the community loves, but we need money. Now the question is does the school want to tough up and tough love for the community, or do we want to go through the old-fashioned route of doing a mill? Do you want? And that's where the community gets involved. That's where we have elections and we have school board levies. That's if the community doesn't want to pay for it, well then that's how you do it. You just go, all right, fine, we need the money one way or the other. It's either cut teachers or sell a farm. You make up your mind, or third option, you raise your taxes. And that's what the community has to decide. And that's a wonderful quandary that you guys have here, is that we want all these services, but we need to find a way to pay for them. And at a $160 million budget, we're still not quite getting everything done. You can look at a boulevard anywhere in the west side right now, and there's some maintenance that needs to be done. Now the question is will the community around that area be willing to pay for it or not? And that's tantamount to what I feel very strongly, and what I wish to do is increase communications throughout the board. And that needs to be done not just from the city council, but from the developer side, from the community activist side, and from, actually, I'm looking, you guys are here because you actually give a care. All right? And, that's the point, is you guys are here because you give a care, but we need to get you guys here. Same with the other party, and you guys need to we all need to sit down and actually, develop a community involvement process. That's
Dick, you had something you want to say?
I had a couple of questions. Where does 17% come from? The state?
The seven-year last reassessment was 7 years ago. The property values have more than a little over doubled in the last 7 years. 1/6 of 100% is about 17%. I spent yesterday visiting the state assessor and what the numbers might look like in the coming 7 years. Now, that's the valuation increase, assuming the mill levy rate stays the same, we should expect the same raise in taxes, so.
I'm not sure that's a valid assumption. We've got some legislative action that has to take place here that I think out there. A lot of legislation went to these reappraisals, not even near as violent as this. We had to cut that on
Well, my question is, let's assume that happens. Values go up, total tax base will increase with the assessment. Will you commit to holding at least reducing the levy rate to whatever that proportion is of the increase so that the overall taxes remain the same?
Two things, I think you've already heard part of it. One thing, the city can raise taxes by itself, I'm pretty certain that one half of the cost of living. And that can be, they only take the full half, they can take part of it, and the rest is like they're not, that's the evaluation. If it's going to go over that, it's going to take the council to approve it. And, if we're still looking at a 5 to 7 minority, you're probably going to get hit with a higher tax. You might want to apply that to please support the vote. But we've got to have a change in the number of people on that council who are a little bit more conservative and have to come up with that board. I just don't see any way to slow it down. At this point in time, I don't, 70% may be scary, but I don't think that's real. I may have people's words, but at this point, I just don't think that's realistic.
Billy, did you have a question? Kind of.
I watch city council every Monday night for 19 years. I've gone through 3 heads, like John.
Mayor.
And Mayor's head, that's what I'm looking for. But the other night when you were talking about down in Missoula where these people were toxic people, such and such. Look, when Stacy Wright got up, and of course right away they put that, I start clearing my throat because that's what she does. She's real good at clearing throat and going, But she said she's not afraid to go down to the city in Missoula. The bums or whatever you call them don't bother me. What bothers me is when I took my daughter-in-law down there, walking, she's, what is it? What is this? I said, oh, it's your. So what are you going to do? What can you do about it? We have to shovel our snow. Can't they clean the urine off the sidewalk?
Who wants to
John.
Yes, Chair. Okay, that, we know.
Wait a minute, first John raised his hand here first.
They actually eventually do clean it off, and that's because our downtown association has a contract with the, I think, Opportunity Workshops for the clean team. But they're like 6 or 7 people, and so they start at one end, and it takes them a long time to get to the other end. What we need to do about it is pass ordinances so the police department has the tools to handle these problems. And right now, the police department don't have the correct tools to handle the problem. And if you really wanted my thought on it, and I think I said it before, there's a difference between Missoula's homeless and the people that come here because we are such a nice, giving, caring community, which I love that we are. Okay? But when they break the rules, what we got in our ordinance is a $100 fine. Well, they can't afford a $100 fine. If it was up to me, I'd put them to work, and they would be cleaning that up. And if they wouldn't want to do that, they'll leave town. And then we can handle our own. What they need to do at the Pavarello Center is have a screening process set up. So they know whether they're covering Missoula's homeless because they're unemployed or because something happened, but they're from Missoula, they live in Missoula, and we help them out. I'm a firm believer in helping them people out. But I am not a firm believer in helping somebody out that just wants to stay drunk, just wants to defecate on our public streets, and just wants to harass people, and they're not even from here, but they come here in the summertime because they know they can get a square meal at the Pub or 316 or someplace like that. Okay? I'm sorry, but that is really the way I feel, and I think we need to make good regulations that will control that. Unfortunately, I hate controlling people because I believe people should be able to control themselves. But unfortunately, we have some in our society that you have to put the fist down and you have to control. And that's one of the population parts we have to control. I heard Pam Walters say, well, the sidewalks are a nice warm place. Give me a break. Have you ever slept on cement in the wintertime? I'd rather sleep on the grass or in the snow. So that's not true. I'm sorry, I'm a bleeding heart too when I see things I see homeless veterans. Okay, we do a small amount in Missoula, Montana. We have the Valier House. And we try to help homeless veterans, but a lot of them falling through the cracks. You need to get a hold of Esther and Bacchus and all them people and say, hey, we need more federal money to help these people out. Do you know that per capita of people that we have in this state, we have more veterans than darn near any other state in the union? Because Montanans, they serve. And they've served ever since I was a kid. What do you think I went in? Just because I watched all these John Wayne movies? No. You know. But, you know, we don't do enough that way. But we have to take care of our homes. We have to have room for the ones that aren't seeking any help or aren't seeking that type of thing.
John?
And to clean the streets up in Missoula.
Could they put like porta potties in the alleyways or something? And have little arrows?
Unfortunately, they probably would be tipped over before the night was over, or somebody would be sleeping in them.
All right, since you were picked out, John Everson, you're next and then Ryan.
Thanks for picking me. Tomorrow, we're addressing another portion of the downtown problem, Panhandle. Part of, some of what John said, and I'll reiterate, is that giving the police the tools to control this, two ordinances, one that was passed and one hopefully will come out of committee tomorrow, going on next week, will help alleviate part of the problem. It's not going to, do it totally. The Downtown Association and the BID, the Business Improvement District, I know have a power washer. The clean team does go around. More has to be done. The director of BID, Ron Lawson, is doing, has an eye on it. I know that for a fact. So does the Downtown Association. But the key is to pass the ordinances so the police have the tools so we can, address the problem. Every Monday and Wednesday when we go to city council chambers, we look in the doorway early in the morning and find out exactly what you're talking about. And they don't clean that up lickety-split either. You got to give it time. It's going to take time for this to go through and be enforced. I do think that we will see an uptick in the cleanliness of the downtown. And it's important that it does get done because people won't go downtown if it's dirty. So, some of us on council have, and people who aren't here are advocating for that. So, it's not going to be done overnight. You have to give it time, and if it's not, then we can go back and revisit and see what we can do in order to get it better.
Ryan?
Yeah, I guess to start, I'd like to put some context on this issue. First of all, this past year, we've had more people become homeless than we have ever had. And almost half of them are families. So there are economic circumstances that are pushing people to be homeless. And we have to remember that those exist. Second point about context is that the homeless person pissing on the sidewalk is also competing with the drunk college kid or the drunk non-homeless person pissing on the sidewalk. So I don't think you can specifically identify either through ordinance or through the police that these particular people are allowed to piss and these people aren't allowed to piss on the sidewalk. So let's just remember that context, just briefly. The first thing I would want to do is to have public restrooms. I think we need more access to public restrooms. One of the biggest complaints I get from homeless people is they have nowhere to go. Whether they're drunk, whether they're sober, they don't have anywhere to go to use the restroom, to sleep, to change, to do the things that we take for granted. They don't have anywhere to go. So I think a pretty basic solution would be to provide public restrooms. And I'm not going to laugh at you for putting that porta potty idea out there. I'd say we can have a permanent potties out there for. Public restrooms should be downtown, and there's no reason why the homeless or non-homeless can use them alike. Furthermore, in regards to many of the ordinances that are happening now, much of the justification is based on behaviors that are already crimes. Public urination is already crime. Stealing is already a crime. And the ordinances that are going on do not change that. The last thing I would want you to keep in mind that I would suggest that we do is follow a model that I learned in Chicago, Illinois, which is called the Streetwise program. And what it does is it created a social enterprise. So a nonprofit organization that empowers homeless people to sell a magazine, basically, that's called Streetwise, that creates positive interactions between the homeless and non-homeless. It puts money in their pockets, it gets them out of the difficult situations that they're in, it raises awareness about homeless issues, and it's self-sustaining and doesn't require tax dollars to support. That's something that I think in terms of the greater context of dealing with homeless people that have nowhere else to go to use the restroom, that is a much better context to approach the issue. And that's what I would support, more so than what's happening now. But I do recognize that those issues are real, they are disturbing, they are bad for the aesthetic of downtown, and we do want a vibrant downtown. I do not agree with the direction we are going by targeting homeless for being homeless. I think we can do better than that. Thank you.
John Plotman. Just real quick, I know we're short on time. I moved here 3 years ago from the homeless mecca of the West Coast, Seattle, Washington. We put porta potties on the street. You know what happened? People shot heroin, they slept in it, they didn't pee in the porta potty, they peed on it. It did not help anything, except it cost us more taxpayer money. Let's get to the root of the problem. Some people say, well, these people have mental illness issues. Okay, well, let's get to the root of that problem. We all know Montana has an enormous lack of funding when it comes to mental health. We need to go to the state and federal level and say, let's start to take care of this. Don't patch it. You don't put Band-Aids on it. Let's figure out what the problem is. The families are homeless? Why? Because we don't have jobs. Get past the Band-Aid. That's easy. We can slap Band-Aids on stuff all day. The tough part is getting the fix. We need health care, we need mental health care. We only spent about $1.2 million on social services in this city last year, and over $13 million on Parks and Rec. Where's our priorities if we're so concerned about the social issues? We need to start to figure these out and put these priorities in check. If we spend some of the MRA money maybe on sidewalks instead of other things and not have to ding the SIDs on people, then maybe they'd be more willing to donate as well to help us out. There's all these things that it's the trickle-down effect. But we cannot keep giving people a reason to stay homeless. We have to enable them to get out of it themselves, give them the ability to do it. You don't insult a person's pride by giving them handouts. I wasn't raised like that. I'm sure they weren't raised like that. And I firmly believe that if you have handouts, eventually those handouts create beggars. And when that handout's gone, those beggars sometimes will turn to criminal activities because they've been taught to wait for the handout. Don't insult these people by giving them a handout. Give them the ability to get out of it themselves. Go to the root of the problem. Stop patching it up.
No, we're running out of time, folks. Many of us, or some of us in this room, have sat where you are sitting. I know it's not easy, but we certainly appreciate you being here. It's nerve-wracking to get questions, you don't know where they're coming, and I think you did an admirable job. And I think that I want to make, since I'm the moderator. You mentioned something about heroin in Seattle. I had an occasion to talk with the chief of police on, was it Saturday? And he said the drug of choice now in Missoula is heroin because it's very inexpensive. And I was flabbergasted. I thought college town, all the weed, all this. No, it's heroin. Now this is hardcore stuff. So we have a problem, and I hope that any of you that are successful will take this under advisement. But I really appreciate you coming. This is a treat for us as well as for you. Thank you again.
Thank you.